This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. We talk a lot about the Browns head coaches. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank every Browns head coach since the 1999 reactivation. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You know, you kind of forget that coaches have a longer lifespan for the Browns than quarterbacks until you do this list, because the quarterback tier list is ridiculous, right? The one I'm going to do for them since reactivation, because it's like 30 something names, but this one is only 12, so this is very, very manageable. Let's get into it. Hope this is going to be a fun conversation. The holiday season is approaching and the NFL season is going strong. Today, I'm partnered with DraftKings Sportsbook, and an official partner of the NFL. And right now, they have an offer you do not want to miss. All customers can get a no sweat bet on any same game parlay or same game parlay X. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up using my promo code WORSTTAKE. And if you're a new customer, and you're definitely going to want to listen up to this one, right now on DraftKings, new customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Wondering what you can do with $150 in bonus bets? Combine multiple bets together for a shot at an even bigger payout. If sports betting is not available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. All customers can use my promo code WORSTTAKE and get a no sweat bet. Get a bonus bet back if your same game parlay / same game parlay X bet loses. Max reward limits apply. That's promo code WORSTTAKE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. For everybody to have. First guy on this list is so forgetful or so forgettable that I'm not going to lie to you, I am legitimately blanking on homie's name right now. Think it's a Tabo. Nah, let me find out. It's the first coach. He really didn't stay here that long. Chris Palmer. That's who it was. Chris Palmer. He was here for a year, 1999 to 2000. 32 games, won 5 of them, 27 losses. Not the worst win percentage of any coach here, but still pretty bad. Look, I wasn't conscious enough to really know that much about the Browns at this point, so I'm going to just hit them with that forgettable. They came back in 99. I was born in 95. This is just going to be forgettable for me. Now, Butch Davis is the first Browns coach that I remember vividly being the coach of the Browns. And he was very boring at times, or at least my perception of him was of a very boring man. And you have to remember, this is at the same time that Jim Tressel is at Ohio State. And I was just like, dog, are coaches supposed to be this boring? Because Butch Davis, for whatever reason, like always just came off to me as an aggressively boring man. And so did Jim Tressel at that time. Butch made a playoff appearance. Read out some of Butch's stats before we get too into it. Coached from 2001 to 2004. Believe that's 3 seasons. 24-35. Had a .400 win percentage. 1 playoff game, 1 playoff loss. You know, I'm going to put Butch in fun. The reason I'm going to put Butch in fun is because we didn't realize it at the time. But Browns fans had about as much fun in like the early 2000s as they were going to have with this team for about 20 years. It got so bad. It really did out of nowhere. All right. So that's Butch Davis ranked. Now, the next coach they hired after Butch Davis, well, not hired, but Terry Robisky was in there for a little bit. Pretty forgetful. What Terry Robisky do? Went 1-4? Yeah, pretty forgetful. Throw him in that forgetful category. All right. Romeo Crennel. You know what? I'm going to put Butch Davis at the top of forgetful because he's low-key kind of forgetful. Like, you don't remember a single thing about what Butch Davis liked to do, what kind of offense Butch Davis ran. The only thing you know about Butch Davis is that he was kind of a popular coach that you had to hire from college at the time. So I guess at the time it was a big deal when you hired Butch Davis because he was the leader at that Miami. It wasn't a dynasty, but that Miami program, while they still were like Miami. But like, I don't hear people fondly hearkening back to the Butch Davis era in any way, shape, or form. That's why I'm putting in forgetful. Now, you know who wasn't forgetful? My man, Romeo Crennel. Look, Romeo Crennel might have not been the best coach, but you know what Romeo was? Romeo was fun. Romeo was fun at the press conference. Romeo, I think he had one of them Miller Lite commercials, man. Like, Romeo was just a really nice, fun dude who just cared about talking football. Unfortunately, had a 24-40 record, did have the 110-7 season with Derek Anderson. Ironically enough, his defense had nothing to do with it. His defense was actually complete butt cheeks. But Romeo did have a nice long career after that as a guy who popped up as an interim head coach from time to time. Also as somebody who kind of just was a defensive coordinator for a while. Very long career. Believe it ended recently with the Texans where he was an interim head coach. So his last head coaching stint, but he had stints after Cleveland in Kansas City. That is a odd time in Kansas City, right? Where he got that interim job in 2011 and then got the head coaching job in 2012. And then Andy Reid became available and he was out of there the year after. The Texans is a defensive coordinator and then got another job with the Texans there. So Romeo, this is the first time, well, this would be the first and only time he was hired, not because of his previous experience with the team. But, you know, my experience with Romeo, he was fun. That was like the first like fun, like I liked Romeo coming up when I was a kid. I liked Romeo because that was the same time you got Josh Cribbs on the team. It would Cam Wembley looked like he was going to be a thing for like 10 minutes. And then, you know, you won the 10 games. You got Joe Thomas. You know, you felt like things are changing. Unfortunately, more of the same. But Romeo at least kept it fun. And what more can you ask for when you are an aggressively mediocre team at the time, right? Like, it's not like they had expectations. All right. So the next coach we're going to look at is the man genius himself, Eric Mangini. Let me tell y'all something. I hated this man. Painful. Putting him in a painful tier. I hated this man. I could not stand that damn Eric Mangini year. Fun story, if you care. The first time I went to Cleveland Browns Stadium was for a joint practice in Cleveland Browns Stadium, obviously, for the Eric Mangini Browns. And they were playing all this shit on the video board about how Eric Mangini used to be a ball boy here and how he's all Cleveland and all this stuff that they like to play. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh man, it's so cool, man. It's so cool. And then I saw them Browns come out and I was like, oh, nah, dog. We gonna suck, dog. Oh, my goodness. Oh, we sucked with Eric Mangini. The offense was terrible. All I remember is Jake Delhomme and like Colt McCoy. And this was like an offense. I'm going to keep it a buck with y'all. Eric Mangini's Browns were the only, by the way, he went 10 of 22, had a 3.131 percentage. It's like they hired Romeo, they fired Butch Davis and kept going down. he just sucked. Like, there's no other way to put Eric Mangini. Like, it was painful. And I remember I was so fed up as like, how old was I? I was like 14. I was so fed up with Eric Mangini and how awful these offenses were, and watching Jake Delhomme of all people, man, that I walked away from the Browns for like 4 weeks. I was like, I'm not watching the games. I can't watch Colt McCoy one more time. Like, it drove me. I could not stand it. Stand it. It's not Colt's fault. But man, did I hate Colt McCoy during that time. And it's not even because Colt McCoy did anything to me. It's simply because they made me watch so many 3-and-outs, and Colt McCoy just happened to be the poor bastard running them 3-and-outs. Were there any notable assistants? I want to check with this, because I think Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns at this time, which is hilarious because he fucking sucked in Cleveland. Let me tell you. Sucked, I tell you. Terrible. Let's look at some of these stats from the 2010 Browns. I want to know. I want to know who led this team in passing. I want to know. 2010. I'm going to just go Browns history. Because one of the most painful watches. Yeah. The Browns in 2010. They were a bad team. And Colt McCoy had 1,500 yards for 6 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. And that was our leader. He played 8 games that year. Good Lord. Good Lord. How many first downs did they get? 100. They only got 152 first downs. Oh my God. Oh my God. They got 265 first downs total. Okay, that's so much better. So much better. Still not good. Still at the bottom of the league. Yeah, man. I don't know what to tell you. This team just sucked. These Mangini teams were just atrocious. Let's look at some of the other year. The Brady Quinn year. Oh my God, the Brady Quinn year. Yeah, look, Browns fans, we're at a point, and I need to go full screen for this guy, because this point does bear being made. Browns fans, we are spoiled. We are spoiled. We be arguing about Baker Mayfield. We be arguing about all this other bullshit. DTR, Joe Flacco. Is Joe Flacco better than Deshaun? All this goofiness, man. We be us arguing, yapping about these quarterbacks. Let me tell you, all of those arguments are better than watching Brady Quinn throw for 1,300 yards and 1,339 yards. Yes. And 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. My man Brady Quinn was putting up rushing numbers. Like, Nick Chubb's had better seasons than that. Brian Daboll, man. Do you understand why I just could not take him serious when he resurfaced as a legitimate deep offensive coordinator? Why I just refused to take that serious until I had to. Man, Nick Chubb's legit 1,500 yards with Colt McCoy, 6 touchdowns. Man, are you kidding? Nick Chubb's had better seasons. This team sucked. Oh my goodness, they sucked. Good Lord. Whew. Yeah, painful. They weren't awful. They weren't horribly ran or anything. They were just regular shitty, but they were a painful watch. They were so freaking painful. All right. That's Eric Mangini. Pat Shurmur, man. I always feel bad for Pat because Pat just got a raw deal. Pat took over for the Browns in 2011 till 2012, stayed for 2 years. Coached in 32 games, won 9 of them, lost 23 of them for a win percentage point. 281, and it just keeps going down, y'all. It just keeps going down until it doesn't. It's insane. It's truly insane. So there is that whole thing. Pat Shurmur got a little bit of a rough deal. I really don't think Pat Shurmur's failings were 100% on him, but he really wasn't the solution. And at the end of the day, that's all that mattered. I believe he went 4-12. No, 4-12 and 5-11. So he did improve year over year. This is like the Billy Wynn Browns. I don't know why I remember Billy Wynn and associate him with the 2011, 2012 Browns. But yeah. See, look, immediate improvement here where Pat Shurmur got 2,700 yards and 14 touchdowns from Colt McCoy. It's not good, but you know what? It's certainly better. What do you do the next year with Brandon Weeden? I think Brandon Weeden almost had like 3. Yeah, Brandon Weeden had 3,000 yards the next year, 14 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. But we're not going to talk about that. We're just not going to talk about that. Again, if you ever don't feel appreciative for the Browns in their quarterback situation and the arguing that you have to do, go back and look at some of these old quarterback stats, because you know what, man? I'm starting to appreciate PJ Walker, Deshaun Watson, DTR, and Joe Flacco all at the same time a whole lot more, remembering how awful these quarterbacks were and how awful these offenses were around it. Nobody was developing here, dog. Nobody was ever going to develop here. Pat Shurmur, I'm going to put him in forgettable. He's pretty forgettable. All right. Who's up next? Who is the next coach on the list? We got my man Robo Chud. Robo Chud stayed here for just a year, went 4-12, 250 win percentage. Robo Chud is the definition of forgettable. Just the definition of a forgettable dude. He was in there, he was out of there, and it never mattered. Now, I believe he ended up being a casualty of the whole team selling thing, right? Like they sold the team. I believe they fired Pat Shurmur because Pat Shurmur was connected with Mike Holmgren and Tom Heckert. They sold the team to Jimmy Haslam. They had to hire somebody. And I think Chud was just the dude that was willing to take the job. And this kind of bit them in the ass for a couple of years. That they hired Chud and like immediately fired him because it became very difficult for the Browns to find somebody to coach the team the next year. Oh, damn, dog. All right. His assistants were Norv Turner and Ray Horton. I believe Chud being able to get Norv Turner was like a huge reason why Chud was selected as the head coach, because they were like, oh, you get Norv Turner, it's going to be great. We're going to run that Air Coryell offense with Brandon fucking Reading. Yeah, that made a ton of sense, Jimmy. Oh, man. We live a much better life than we started as Browns fans. We got to admit that at some point. All right. So let's look at some of these stats here. Did they do anything well? They led the league in passing attempts. They were top 12 in passing yards. They threw for 4,000 yards as a team. Okay. The offense wasn't awful. That's what we could say about Rob Chudzinski. The offense wasn't awful. Other than that, there's not much you can say. And he was the offensive coordinator for 2007. I remember that. So the offense was not awful. That's good. That's a good thing, right? Who's the quarterback? Jason Campbell ended up being the leading passer? Really? Oh, this must have been. Was this the Josh Gordon year? This had to be the Josh Gordon year. Because there's no way we throw for 4,000 yards and throw that many times if this isn't the Josh Gordon year. Let me see. Receiving, Let's max this out. Yep. It was the Josh Gordon year, 1,600 yards. All right. Brian Hoyer came in and then balled out a little bit, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Jason Campbell, 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions with 2,000 passing yards, 1,700 yards for Brandon Weeden, 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. We were just happy to get over like even touchdown to interception ratio at that time, to be honest with you. Chud, I'm going to say Chud was fun because you know what? Chud didn't get a chance, but the 1 year Chud was in there, it was kind of fun. So I'm going to give Chud the fun ranking. All right. Next coach that we're going to go look at is, I believe, Mike Pettine. Yes. So Mike Pettine, I just don't know why we hired Chud, because hiring Chud really puts you on this downward trajectory to where it ends up like, so you hire Chud for whatever reason. Let me go look at the wiki and see if there's so there's really no real reason he was hired. Like, it's not like the Browns. Oh, my bad. I remember what happened. When did Chip Kelly take the job in Philly? Because if that lines up, then I know exactly what happened. Let me double check that. So Chip Kelly took the job in Philadelphia in 2013. Yeah, okay. All right. So little lore on Robert Chudzinski and how Chip Kelly basically ruined the Cleveland Browns. Like, for legitimate, 3 years. Chip Kelly ruined the Browns. So the Browns, Jimmy Haslam had just bought the team. And Jimmy Haslam wanted to make a big splash, right? As owners do, right? We see this all the time when a new team gets an owner and they buy a team. This is how Sean Payton then ends up in Denver. A new owner wants to hire a coach, wants to make a splash. So that new owner decides they're going to make a new splash. Jimmy Haslam's big splash. This was when we knew that we were going to be in for a little bit of a rough one with Jimmy. He wanted Chip Kelly. Now, you guys are going to hear this who aren't familiar with Chip Kelly back in the day and go, Chip Kelly, we really went that crazy. No, Chip Kelly was seen as man genius back then. He was seen as a genius. Like he had exploited offense and just figured it out. So they wanted Chip Kelly. Philadelphia had just fired Andy Reid, but the Browns wanted Chip Kelly. And Jimmy, he was willing to throw money at it. So he threw a bunch of money at Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly agreed to terms. The reports came out that Chip Kelly was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, right? Then he ended up taking the job for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know what happened, but the Eagles, he went to the Eagles. Never coached for the Browns. So the Browns then got left holding the bag because while they were waiting for Chip Kelly, and you guys can correct me if you have a better recollection of this than me, I believe while they were waiting for Chip Kelly, everybody else that they wanted got hired. So the only dude left that they felt like was an acceptable candidate was Rob Chudzinski. And the reason they felt like Rob Chudzinski was a acceptable candidate, and it's going to sound crazy, but if you weren't around in 2013, what I'm about to say here makes sense. The reason they hired Rob Chudzinski is because he could get Ray Horton to be his defensive coordinator. And at the time, Ray Horton was seen as like the next defensive coordinator prospect to be a head coach. He never ended up doing that. But Ray Horton was a hot coordinating candidate at the time. For those of us who remember 2007, if you don't remember Ray Horton, he the brother with the dreads. I mean, not the dreads. He the brother with the braids that was coaching defense. And he coached in Pittsburgh and Arizona. I think he just got let go in Arizona because they fired everybody. And he can get Ray Horton. That was why you were able to get your hands. Well, that was why Chud was able to get the job. So that's why Chud got hired. But Jimmy never wanted Chud. And then Jimmy realized he didn't even want Ray. So 2014 happens and the Browns have to hire another coach. And the same, and then what happens because you fired Chud so fast, dog? Like they fired Chud 1 year into the job for no reason too. It wasn't even like he had a particularly bad season, like a bunch of injuries and stuff. The team wasn't that good. Like there was really no real reason to fire Chud, but they fired him. Like he wasn't fired 1 year disaster show bad. But that meant that the Browns looked like a tumultuous situation. And because the Browns looked like a tumultuous situation, absolutely nobody wanted to take that job. You know how people talk about David Tepper and how David Tepper's going to have a hard time finding guys to take that job? That's how Jimmy was seen in like 2013. Fortunately, it doesn't feel like that anymore, but that's how Jimmy was seen. So Jimmy had to hire whoever wanted to come. And Mike Pettine got the job because Mike Pettine was able to get his hands on a guy we all know who just got released from Washington named Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan was available. Mike Pettine can get him to be the offensive coordinator. And that was a big deal because Kyle Shanahan was highly acclaimed off his work with RG3. I was like, big swing, even back then, to get Kyle Shanahan. And this is why I'm going to put Mike Pettine in the let me cook section. Now, is it true? And when I say let me cook, by the way, the rankings are actually good for coaches that are actually good. Let me cook is a coach that, look, I understand that they're not good, but I do have a positive opinion of them for one reason or the other. Fun coaches is obvious. Forgettable coaches is obvious. Painful coaches, Eric Mangini sucked the soul out of my life. So I just could not stand it anymore. But Mike Pettine, I'm going to put him in Let Me Cook. The reason I'm going to put Mike Pettine in Let Me Cook is because I am convinced till this day that Mike Pettine could have went 500 a couple of times with this team if you just simply drafted competently in 2014. 2014, one of the worst Browns drafts of all time. We've recounted it. They drafted Johnny Manziel, Justin Gilbert in the first round. Now, part of that's on Mike Pettine because he did want Justin Gilbert. But if you had just not taken Johnny Manziel, let me make that clear. If you just took anybody else, I don't even got to be a quarterback, anybody else, I do think you can get to 500. But Johnny Manziel was such a weird presence amongst this team that it completely tanked the season. The Browns were like 7-4, but Jimmy really, really, really wanted Johnny to play, and Brian Hoyer was playing well. Let me go back and look at the stats so I can tell you a little bit of a clear picture of that 2014 season. So 2014, Brian Hoyer threw for 3,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. At the time, I believe that they made the change because I think that number kind of gets inflated because of what Brian really struggled with at the end of the year. But if we go back to 2014 and then we look at the last game they won was at Atlanta. If we look at that stretch, Brian Hoyer, 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, an 82 rate. So he wasn't terrible. But they really wanted Johnny Manziel in there. They really, really wanted Johnny Manziel in there. And when I say they, I'm talking about Jimmy. Ownership wanted Johnny Manziel in there. Again, I'm telling y'all, dog, we don't realize how lucky we are to be living in this era because, boy, this was hell. So they put in Johnny Manziel. And Johnny Manziel, in his first 2 NFL games combined, threw for 175 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was not helped that Connor Shaw played 1 game and got more yards and less interceptions than Johnny Manziel. That year was a fucking mess. Oh my God. Oh man, the Browns were like 7-4. 7-4. And then like Josh Gordon came back off of this crazy suspension he got from being on the team playing with like Joe Hayden at the end of the season. He got like a year banned for that because he drank alcohol. And apparently that was a part of his protocol. And he just kept failing protocol. We know the Josh Gordon story. So Josh Gordon came back. The Browns win the first game back he plays in Atlanta. I remember that because Josh Gordon was super sweaty in that game. Like he was clearly out of shape when he came back to join the team in Atlanta. It was obvious. Browns play the Buffalo Bills. They get blown out by Buffalo, and that was it. Jimmy lost it. He was like, I'm done. I want to see Johnny. He's a first-round pick. He's got all this hype. Let's put Johnny football in. Let's stop messing around with this damn Brian Hoyer and put the young fella in. Well, they put the young fella in. Oh, no. My bad. They put him in at the end of the Bills game. They keep Brian Hoyer for the Colts game. Brian Hoyer legitimately had one of the worst football games I've ever seen a Browns quarterback have in that Colts game. So, like, it wasn't like it was an unpopular opinion to switch to Johnny. Like, at that point, people were tired of Brian Hoyer because like the Browns could have won that game. Yeah, Brian Hoyer threw for 13 of 30, 136, 2 interceptions and a touchdown. Oh God. He was god awful in that game. And the stat sheet don't even do it justice. Go back and watch that game. It's painful. So don't go back and watch it. But that game happens and that like is a huge game that kind of messes with the Browns playoff odds. Right? Think of it as if, like, what if Joe Flacco went in there and just threw an absolute turd last week versus the Jaguars? That's how you would have felt that happened is how people felt after that Colts game. So they switched to Johnny Manziel for the Bengals game, and everybody's getting all excited, dog. We think we about to ball out. Like, okay, Johnny Manziel about to show the world. Dog, we didn't score a point. We didn't score. The Bengals beat our ass. Thoroughly beat the Browns' ass. And at that point, I think everybody realized the season was over. I think Johnny realized the season was over, clearly, based on his actions. Everybody realized it. Johnny Manziel went 10 of 18 for 80 yards and 2 interceptions in that game, and he ran for 5 attempts for 13. He played like straight a Dooku. And that's when the season ended. They had to play 2 more games that year, one against the Carolina Panthers. That's the game where Johnny Manziel snuck off the reservation to go to Vegas. And then the Baltimore game is when Connor Shaw played, and he had a real gutsy performance that Tony Grossi didn't shut up about for like 3 years. Legitimately 3 years. 2015 is a bit of an interesting season because it didn't start out terrible. I believe they were 1-1. They made this huge comeback versus the Tennessee Titans, but then it became very obvious that the Browns weren't good at all. They just weren't good at all. Losing Kyle Shanahan was just too much. You lost Kyle Shanahan in the offseason that year because you wanted to hang on to Johnny Manziel. You brought in Josh McCown and adult the room, and Josh McCown was like legitimately played well. He was 1-7. So I don't know how good he was playing. He was 1-7, but he did throw 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Johnny Manziel, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 2-4 record. So he won more. And how many yards he had? 1,500 yards. And then we even let Austin Davis get a couple starts in there. That's how you know the season went to hell. We started a dude named Austin Davis. He went 0-2, 500 yards, and a touchdown. So, yeah, season went to hell. But you know what, man? Mike Pettine got Johnny. Mike Pettine got Johnny, dog. I will die on that hill. He got Johnny. He is if he gets another shot to be a head coach, I do believe him to be a competent one. I don't know if he's going to be good, but you know what? If you have a decent team, he ain't going to mess it up. He ain't going to mess it up. He's not special, but he ain't going to mess it up. So that's why I got my long explanation on why I have Mike Pettine on Let Me Cook. All right. Now we're going to jump to Hugh Jackson, who is clearly going to go to the Hugh Jackson one. Now, look, Hugh Jackson's hire was supposed to be seen as this like different thing. This changing of the guard for the Browns. Because it was like the first guy that we wanted in the Haslam era that we actually got. Everybody else was like, hey, I guess you can kind of get this guy because he can get a coordinator. So it's the first time you got somebody that you actually wanted since legitimately probably Butch Davis or Romeo Crennel. Since Romeo Crennel. It didn't change nothing. Y'all know the story. Hugh Jackson, he's terrible. Hugh Jackson got fired a couple years into his career, coached a surprising amount of games. Lost almost all of them, 3 of 31, win percentage of .88. You know the story. Greg Williams, another fun one, right? And he's at the top of fun. Greg was fun. Was Greg a good head coach? I will never know. But you know what? Greg was fun. He gave them fun quotes. He said he's going to whoop ass, and he did all them press conference, and he going to breathe fire and brimstone. And then you went 5-3 with Greg Williams, and you had fun. We didn't let it go for years. Like until we hired Jim Schwartzer, where people just did not let like the fact that we didn't hire Greg Williams back ever. Like they never let it go. But you know what, man? Greg was fun. Greg was fun. I'm going to put Greg in fun. By the way, with these tiers, I'm not necessarily saying that Mike Pettine's a better coach than Greg Williams. I'm just saying there was more to Mike Pettine that we didn't get to find out. Greg Williams, he was fun. He was fun. And he did a good job. And then we hired Freddie Kitchens. And dog, I don't know what to do with this one. Because it wasn't forgettable. It wasn't as bad as Hugh Jackson, but this shit was painful, dog. I had season tickets this year. And look, this is a personal gripe. I had season tickets that year that Freddie Kitchens was the head coach. And that was the most miserable year of Browns football I've ever experienced in my life. That was miserable, dog. Me and my brother were all excited. Browns look good in 2018. We got season tickets. We thinking we about to just like see the dream happen. And then like immediately you play the Tennessee Titans and you realize ain't no dream. We traded for Odell too that year. Oh, it was no dream. Learned a lesson. That was second year of me doing this YouTube stuff. And I learned how to cover a team that stinks. Oh boy, it was a tough adjustment. So Freddie Kitchens, got to put him in painful. Was he more painful than Eric Mangini? No, because Freddie Kitchens didn't make me stop watching football like Eric Mangini did. At least the Browns moved the ball before they turned it over. You know what I mean? Like Eric Mangini would turn that thing over and not move it. Like, I don't know, what the hell was we doing? All right, man. Kevin goes and actually good. I mean, do I have to explain this one to anybody? He's the only coach that's over 500 on this list. I don't have to explain this. I know there are some people who like don't think he's good or don't think it's an accomplishment that he's good. And that's a different argument that you could probably have. But the fact is that not a lot of coaches win coach of the year. Not a lot of coaches have an over 500 record. Kev's good, dog. Kev's like pretty damn good. You got to the playoffs with him. He's the second coach other than Butch Davis you got to the playoffs with. And like, it was like an 11-win team. Yeah. The best stuff you've ever done since reactivation is Kevin Stefanski related. It's obvious that he's at the top of this, but that's my coach's tier list. And by the way, there's a giant gap between Kevin and the rest of these guys. Like, I don't need to explain it, but there's a giant gap between Kevin and the rest of these guys. Like Greg Williams, I think people will make the argument that there's not that much of a gap, but I would argue that there's more of a gap because Greg only had to coach for 8 games. Kevin's coached like a bunch of seasons, and his win percentages, it speaks for itself. What they're doing 8-5 with this team right now, it speaks for itself. It really does. But yeah, Kevin, tier above all of this. Now look, almost everything in this tier list is hot garbage. I would say the only thing that there are 4 coaches in here that I'm like, they weren't hot garbage. Like 4 coaches in here that weren't hot garbage. Greg Williams wasn't hot garbage. Mike Pettine wasn't hot garbage. Romeo Crennel, most certainly not hot garbage. And that's about it. I don't know. Butch Davis was good at Miami. And he was eyed at North Carolina. He got him in academic issues. So he wasn't terrible. But like 3 of these coaches like had great careers or had great careers before. All 4 of those coaches had great careers before the Browns or great careers after the Browns that still continued. Romeo Crennel got multiple head coaching jobs. Mike Pettine got multiple DC jobs. And Kevin's still with the Browns. So that's my tier list. Let me know what you think. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace. Before I get into this tier list, though, I want to thank my sponsor, DraftKings.